Hello there, this is Fiona, host and main GM for What Am I Rolling, a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast. This is a bonus Q&A episode to tide us over to the next one-shot, and it is indeed a very special Q&A, as this week I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Daniel Hand, aka the RPG Therapist. Daniel is an experienced counsellor who offers integrative counselling and quest therapy. That's RPG story-based therapy. RPG therapy uses storytelling and dice to help predominantly younger clients explore their inner worlds. His book, Role-Playing Games and Psychotherapy, A Practitioner's Guide, is an accessible and comprehensive resource for any practitioner who wishes to incorporate tabletop RPGs into their client work. It was a delight to talk to Daniel and discuss our passions not only for tabletop RPGs, but about their benefits beyond the table. You can find out more about Daniel's work on his website, Monomyth Counselling, and his YouTube channel, The RPG Therapist. You can also grab your own copy of Role-Playing Games and Psychotherapy from all good bookshops. I'll put links to all of Daniel's work on the What Am I Rolling website and in this episode's show notes. All right, well, let's just start nice and simply. Who are you and what do you do?
Oh, who am I? Jeez, don't start with hard questions.
Big, deep question there.
Well, I think my name's Daniel Hand. I'm a therapist in private practice. I'm an author. I'm a game designer. A friend recently pointed out that I am now also a content creator, which I've completely unfriended him because of that. You know, we've known each other for 20 years, and I've just said, look, mate, don't ever say that to me again, ever. My latest book is Role-Playing Games and Psychotherapy, A Practitioner's Guide. Get your copy on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Spring and Nature, and wherever you get your reading material. Ugh.
I know.
But also, I've got a YouTube channel. I've got 2 YouTube channels. I've got the RPG Therapist with Daniel Hand, where I do basically what we're doing here today. I'm also on the International Writers Fellowship, where we do live stream writing sprints and talking about stuff.
Awesome.
And every now and again, I actually get to play RPGs.
What?
I know, geez. Once in a blue moon, maybe, but yes, it happens.
It does happen to all of us at some point. We do get to play and not just run and make content all about it and just read them as like late night book reading. My first question then is always like, how did you discover role-playing games and how did you get into them?
I am not one of these people who can claim to have been playing it for 40 years. I'm only 40 now, so I would have been an early starter. So the first RPG I ever played was actually a writing exercise, because when I was at uni, I was a member of a fantasy writing forum, and there was just something called an RPG, and we each created a character, not necessarily according to stats or anything like that. Just, this is the character I'm going to write. And then we had a play-by-post game. One person wrote a paragraph, then another person wrote a paragraph, then I wrote a paragraph, just reacting to each other. And that went on for as long as it went on and fizzled out, as those things often do. And that was kind of symptomatic of me, because ever since then, the RPGs have all been about the story elements, first and foremost. In terms of kind of more classic TTRPGs, my first ever game was actually with The One Ring, role-playing game, simply because I'm a huge Tolkien nerd.
Yeah,
I'm not one of those Tolkien nerds whose favorite book is The Silmarillion.
There's weirdly so many of those people who say that. It's really wild. I've only read like The Hobbit and most of Lord of the Rings, but everyone's always like, you need to read this, and I'm like, I think I got the vibe. I'll be honest, I think I got it.
I'm even worse than those nerds, because I'm the Tolkien nerd who prefers the history of Middle Earth.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah, it's sad. But as soon as there was just a game set in Tolkien, I mean, obviously I'd heard of MERP, but it was old and had a reputation for being unfaithful to the canon, put you like that. And The One Ring was loudly proclaimed as being Tolkien in an RPG format. So I got it up, then had to spend an inordinate amount of time trying to find a group who would play it, because you know what it's like trying to find a group that plays esoteric RPGs. And back then I didn't know that. But yeah, found somebody, and the rest is kind of history. And now I'm going to die under a pile of books.
I think we all are. Anyone that listens to this podcast, definitely. I think they have not the shelf of shame. I think the bookcase of pride is what I would call it. Just chock-a-block full of books of stories and game mechanics that you know one day you just need to find that group to do it, and we'll see. I'm not looking at anyone's bookcases in particular. Just looking on the Zoom.
Yes, it's like, for your listeners, I am currently surrounded literally on four sides by books in a room that you would be hard pressed to get a single bed in. The only place that doesn't have a shelf right now is right above the door. And I'm reaching the stage where it wouldn't be too stupid to walk underneath a shelf.
I mean, that's prime real estate, right? You could get a...
Yeah, I mean, there's no danger of something falling on you as you walk underneath it. Especially not, against the Dark Master arrived this morning. That's not going to kill you when it hits you on the head. Dungeon Crawl Classics, you'll be fine.
Oh my god, yeah. So somebody gifted me a physical copy of that whole thing. And I was like, this is a lot. That is something to open doors with. Sounds like then you've got experience of through your career as well, like doing different RPG systems. Do you have a particular favorite one that you would use, or one that you like to play in or run? Because it sounds like you obviously, from just us briefly chatting, that you're mostly I don't like the words forever DM because that always seems negative perhaps, but as a ongoing GM, is there a particular system that you like to use, or you're like, oh, this is really one that I want to keep using or play in yourself?
Well, on the contrary, actually, I'm only a forever DM in my professional life, because obviously one thing I considering it's the whole spiel, I haven't actually mentioned it yet. Obviously, I'm the RPG therapist because I use RPGs with my clients. And yes, obviously, the forever GM there because...
Yeah.
I mean, no, that's a lie. Sometimes I'll let the clients take over because that's a whole different exercise. But no, socially, poor old Pat, he's the forever GM. I keep trying to say, look, I'll run this happily, but he's the one who, I say, he loves Roll20, and he already has it. Whereas I'm very theatre of the mind. We don't need Roll20. Let's just,
let's just talk to each other. The
dragon's over there. Just kill it. Yeah, but where? just over there. It's fine.
Don't worry.
Socially, the One Ring will always be my baby. Especially, I mean, I loved the first edition, but then as soon as Free League got hold of,
I was about to ask which edition, because I really love the second edition with Free League. It's so good.
We haven't actually played it yet because of so many other games, but if I was being sent to a desert island and it could only take one game with me, it would be that. They've just done a Kickstarter for their Moria. Finally we get Khazad-dûm for the One Ring. It's only taken 14 years, 12 years?
A long time. Yeah, I'm very excited. That the alt covers for that and everything. I was like,
no,
very excited.
So the Kickstarter started at 2 p.m. and I was in the hospital because I had an appointment. And I was refreshing over and over again, and it got to 10 past, and I sent a message to my RPG group, come on, Freely, you said 2 p.m. Come on, where is my book? Dan, it's 1.
Oh no. Oh no.
Okay, that. So that's how eager I am for it.
That's the level of it. I think what I love about the One Ring, I'm sure we'll go into other things as well as we talk about it, is that certainly in the second edition, just the idea that no matter what your role is in the party, like for the traveling and stuff, it's important. Everything's important. And like the combat is hard because it's meant to be hard. And it just, all of it feels so thematic and baked in. It really feels really thought out and well done. And I just thought with the traveling aspect and the journeying and stuff like that, everyone has a place. So you're not like, say, in Dungeons and Dragons where you're like, okay, I kind of built a social character and we seem to be going for a dungeon. So I guess I could Vicious Mockery. I guess I could do this. So I think with the One Ring, everyone shines, not consistently, but like there's a spotlight. This is your moment if you're doing this, etc. Whereas you don't get that in every single session in Dungeons and Dragons, just depending on the story and stuff. So I and also it's a beautiful book. It feels beautiful. It looks beautiful. And I'm one of those people who now get starter sets like physically because I want to be like, oh, look how beautiful these things are. Like, why don't you just play it? It's a board game, but you have to act a little bit more like the little meeples. You know, that's how I try and trick people into playing games with me.
The One Ring starter set might well be the best single RPG product out there, just in terms of production values. It's a GM screen, a map, obviously the game, a solo game. Yeah, if you just anybody listening, if you've even got a slight interest in Tolkien, if you don't own the One Ring starter set, go out and get it now.
Yeah, the way that it's just like, okay, you could be hobbits in the starter set, and here are the rules, and it just takes you through it gently, and then obviously, yeah, you're like, oh, you want the full game? You want to be elves and dwarves and men from the north, all that sort of thing. We can do that as well. Again, this is more of a deep dive on the One Ring right now.
Yeah,
like,
I'm happy.
I know. I was gonna say you're happy. Forgive me, I can't remember the actual sort of names of the careers or the hero classes, etc. But it's just so good to say that, yeah, you can be anything. We don't have to be like, oh, ideally you need to have this, and this. You know, to be a halfling, you have to be only these things. You could be anything. And then on top of that, this idea of having bringing up an heir and having the role play session when you're going through like the motion of the years or something, like you could be like, I'm going to train up what my next character will be, and then when they take it on, they will gain some of my benefits. And I just thought, again, from a mechanics point of view, I was like, that's really cool, that legacy sort of standpoint. But it's just a really cool role play thing that you can get to create and mold a character that you might have to play in a couple of sessions' time because you fought an orc and lost, you know. So
didn't come home.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, yes, but the other great thing is, yes, you can be pretty much anything you want, but all of it feels authentic to the setting. You know, as you say, you're not an entertainer who's underground searching. You know, how does a singer end up in a dungeon? You know,
they got lost and they were like, these people know where they're going. It's the Douglas Adams, Dirk Gently's holistic. It's like they seem to know where they're going. I'll end up there, and you go, oh no, they did not know where they were going.
But I love that, and since then, because I was very nervous when I heard that somebody other than Cubicle 7 was on it, because I loved the first edition so much. Since then, Freely can do no wrong in my eyes. I've got Twilight 2000, Dragonbane, Coriolis, just you know, the list goes on. It's
Dragonbane is beautiful. Again, the Johan Egerkrans, the designer, the Vassan as well. They're they're beautiful. But enough about Freely. They're not sponsoring this podcast, but I agree to go buy Freely.
Really, if you want me to review your products, just drop me an email. I am there.
So I guess the sort of bigger question is obviously, you play the One Ring, you play, seems like fairly regularly. You're using Roll20 and stuff like that. Was there a point where you're like, I want to start using this in my work with my clients? Like, what was the sort of tipping point, I guess?
When you're doing your basic training to become a therapist or counselor, you've got to do obviously a lot of theory, but you've also got to do those NAF presentations, like choose a hobby. How would you use that with your clients? You know, choose a creative activity. How would you use that? So, and again, me being me, it was all about stories initially. You know, how could you use story structure with clients? And I did a presentation about drawing maps with clients, because who doesn't love fantasy maps, you know?
That's cool, yeah.
And I also did one on board games. I didn't actually do one on role-playing games, but it was kind of there. It was like, oh, yeah, I should do this at some point. Then a few years later, when I was in private practice working, I had a young client come along and nothing else would work. A poor little guy, he developed mutism. So he just couldn't get the words out. He was trying so hard. It wasn't that he wasn't engaging. He was just couldn't talk, poor lad. Tried absolutely everything I could think of. In the end, I thought, yeah, let's give it a try. We've been thinking about it for a while. Maybe this is the time. So I broke out the D&D Essentials kit. I think they've changed it now, haven't they? But it was the
the Essentials kit is the current starter. There's another starter set that's come up, but it was sort of an in-betweeny to get people in. So yeah,
spent 2 sessions creating a character with him. Since then, never used D&D in a session again, because clients come to you to talk, or if their kids play, not to do paperwork. Yeah, quite. So, but we did that. Started off in Fandalen. Obviously, well, that's where everything kind of is set in, I think both box sets at the time. Walked him in, saw a few locals sitting around, and just had some local come up to him and say, "Hi, how you doing?" Obviously in a completely over-the-top voice. Instantly, this kid was talking.
Wow.
And not just talking, "Hi, I did," but talking like this, because he created a dragonborn sorcerer, a blue dragonborn who obviously breathed lightning, and therefore he had a sore throat all the time.
Of course.
Yeah. And that was like, it's like, okay. No, we can do this. We can do this. This is just chill. And that was the moment. But also it's a big lesson for me, because, as I say, D&D just could not be used consistently with clients, because it's just too, like I say, it took 2 sessions because don't forget, a therapy session is 50 minutes usually.
Right, yeah.
And you could give pre-generated characters, as helpful as they can be, they're never as good as your own creation.
Right.
And so next step was to find a simpler system. And obviously there were a few out there, but none of them really scratched the itch. So I wrote my own in the end, which eventually became my book. Because the other thing, obviously, is now that I'm using it, it's a case of more people need to be doing this. Right, come on, do it. Why aren't you doing it yet? And a big thing that puts, outsiders of the hobby off, if you want to term it like that, is there's the whole satanic panic / that's something that only nerds do. But also there's the, you want to come play an RPG? Well, here's the player's handbook, here's the GM's guide, here's the monster manual, here's the supplement, here's that supplement, here's the map book. Here, a bit off-putting. I mean, we were just talking about Against the Dark Master and Dungeon Crawl Classics. I mean, good Lord, I feel.
It's weird, because certainly for Dungeon Crawl Classics, a lot of it is just like, just randomize everything and don't worry about it too much. But I had this conversation with somebody else about like getting people to play role-playing games versus a board game. Because with board games, you can bring a board game and even be that person who goes, well, learn as we go, and have a rubbish time. But at least by the end of the 90 minutes or however long you throw yourself into whatever strategy game it is, and you go, well, we did it. I now know. I know what my feelings are about it. We won't play that again. And that's fine, because it's all contained in a box. Whereas role-playing games, suddenly, like you said, there's suddenly a big learning curve straight away for people for certain games. Like, oh, you need to know all this lore, perhaps. Or you need to know this mechanic. Or you don't want to get it wrong. But and then on top of that, you're then asked, okay, create a character, role-play as that character. Maybe you're like, oh, okay, we're in a dungeon, there's lots of puzzles. Then you're asked to solve these puzzles and riddles. And it's just like, there's a lot to it, unless you really just go, I'm a theatre kid, or I love this sort of thing, and you push yourself straight into it, or you just don't do anything. And I think certainly with those games, role-playing games, like some people just get it after the first session, but maybe it takes 2 or 3 sessions to be like, oh, I really like this system. And get to use the whole thing. Maybe you don't do combat in that first session. There's a lot more that people go, I have to put in a lot more energy for role-playing games versus a board game, or versus watching TV with my friends, or playing video games where everything is automated. So I can totally understand why people maybe just say board games is enough for me, because that's something like I could put this on my shelf and never look at it again. Whereas role-playing games are like all this stuff, all this extra thing that I don't have time to think about it. But on the flip side, I know people, it sort of gets to that point, like where MCM I was recently at, and there's so many Gen Z and below that are coming up to like talking to myself and other podcasts, and like, oh, we'd love to play, but we don't know where to start, and we don't want to get it wrong. And in my head, I was like, you don't get it wrong, you just play it, and that's because obviously I just threw myself into it myself. But some people do need that curve, that they need something to bounce off of, and then can go straight to like, I want to do the city thing, I want to burn down this house, I want to do, and that's okay. But then on that flip side, that being like a first time GM, it's like, oh no, I want to manage these expectations, and I want to make sure that they have fun, but also here is a story that I wrote that is very personal to me, and then the players have happened to it, and that's not my story anymore. And so there's a lot more I think, complex factors. And then on top of that, as you were saying, when people looking from the outside, like, oh, maths and nerdy, satanic panic. But then we also have like bigger companies are like, oh, the D&D movie, we've done this. And they're like, oh, and we're all there going like, yes, that is kind of what D&D is like sometimes, not all the time. And so then we're sort of, maybe there's a worry that we're going to have people coming going, oh, this is not like the film. This is not like the TV show. And you're like, yeah, because it's not, and that's okay. So there's always other factors I find within it.
And that is a big issue that the industry has, because Joe Public genuinely believes that D&D is the RPG hobby. If you ask somebody what an RPG is, they'll stare at you like you've gone mad. You say, do you know what D&D is? Like, oh yeah, that. And as I say to people, yeah, that's like saying that all board games are Monopoly.
Yeah.
And we mentioned starter sets a little while ago, and that's what I really like about starter sets, because they look like board games.
Yes, 100%.
But also, I forgot what the name of the publisher is. They've got two games. They've got Dusk City Outlaws and the Spectaculars. Or was it just Spectacular? But they are massive boxes, and they look and feel like board games. So the way you create your character is everybody gets this little tray. You put a character sheet on there, and then you choose a handful of cards and put those cards on your tray, and they make your powers and stats and all that. So
cool.
Yeah, cool is the only word for it. I am a big fan of starter sets and board game looking products generally.
I appreciate, obviously, with pandemic stuff and everything like that. With
Pandemic? Never heard of it.
Never heard of it. I know that other board game that people keep talking about. With that, obviously, I assume some of your sessions have been both online and in person. For you, if you're doing RPG sort of toolkit stuff with your clients, I'm guessing there's a big shift between online and in person. And is there a preference for you, do you think, in that respect, if that's something that you've explored?
Well, actually, on the contrary, no. There isn't that big a difference for me personally.
Sure, yes, of course.
As I think I mentioned earlier, I am very big on theatre of the mind. I am largely because, like I say, I approached it very much with when I was creating the system with okay, I need to create something that is going to be very basic so that a therapist can pick up the book whenever it's published and not need to go out and buy a bag full of dice and 200 miniatures and half a dozen battle maps. It's just a case of, no, you've got this book, you'll have a D6 lying around somewhere because everybody does. That'll do. And I actually work exclusively online now because I've got clients all around the world, and the commute to and from Thailand is a bit of a way between you and me.
I can imagine the busy, rush hour, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. The traffic's a nightmare, especially over India. It's just oof.
Oof. Yes, indeed.
So for me personally, not really, but it's all about getting into the spirit of it, and because the big power of RPGs within therapy, and this was demonstrated in that young man who couldn't talk and then was talking, is because all of a sudden everything becomes the character's problem. So the boy didn't have to speak because his character was speaking. So he was still anxious about speaking. But if the character was speaking, then anything bad that was going to happen to the character. And obviously the lesson was, well, nothing bad's going to happen to you. So he could experience that. And then obviously a couple of sessions later, I could point out, you do know that you're the one who's doing the talking, right? And go, oh yeah, I'm fine. Huh. And so, as we all know, there are so many different ways of playing a game. You've got VTTs, you've got miniatures, you've got theatre of the mind, you've any combination thereof. For me personally, again, I'm very much focused on the story side, the character side. Not in so much as, we've got big epic plots that we've got to follow, more along the lines of, well, if we create the character, we've got to have things to happen to the character so that the player can react to them. And then we can take a step back and psychoanalyze what was going on for the player at that particular moment. And dice I don't have a dice problem.
I don't think anyone that says I don't have a dice problem, they look at their jar of dice that they've gone, I was going to say, have you got a bag just appears? Amazing.
I counted yesterday.
Oh no!
I'm currently waiting on 7 sets of dice.
Daniel.
Yesterday I was waiting on 8 sets, but one of them arrived this morning.
Oh well.
But they're so nice.
You're preaching to the choir. I've got a whole set and I've gone, I can't. Because a lot of my online, all of my online stuff now, the one I've run the most is D&D. It's a regular game. And of course, all that is built in with the D&D Beyond stuff. So that is all great. But what I've discovered is that if I share my audio, if I'm doing like immersive stuff like that, it'll also share the sound of the dice rolling, and they freaked out the first time that happened. I was like, oh, it's a natural one, and it's some sort of mimic dice that like makes noises, and they were like, what is that? And I was like, oh, calm down, it's fine, it's just I mucked up, it's fine, it's still a natural one. So when you have a session that coming up with, and you're going to do the creating the character and all that sort of thing, in terms of the story, are you led by your client, or do you have some things in mind from what you've spoken about previously? Like, how do you come up with, like, I guess the mission, the reason why we're playing, the adventure that they're on? Is it more informed of, like, is it more improv? Like, where would you like to go today? And then you react to that, or do you have possibly some themes in mind from a previous discussion you've had with them?
Yeah, and that's actually my favorite part of the whole thing. So again, coming at this from an author's perspective, I've been a professional fantasy author for mumble years now. What I created specifically to help A, clients, but B, also other therapists and players. You don't have to be a therapist to buy my book. Just promise you're not going to therapize your friends.
Yes, very true.
I hesitate to say I created it because I'm sure somebody else will have done it beforehand. Sure. But I outlined something that I called the story trinity, basically saying that every story in existence has to have 3 things, and only 3 things. They can do without absolutely anything. Because this was one of the presentations I did on my course, and I got into a bit of not a row, but
heated discussion.
Yes, with somebody who just wouldn't have it that when I said a story doesn't need an ending. So of course it needs an ending. No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. Absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, Pride and Prejudice ended when Darcy and Elizabeth got married. If that's the end of their story, then bloody hell, it was a quick marriage.
Yeah, and definitely there's been other stories that have continued on what happened afterwards. So yeah, it doesn't end like that. Yeah.
But the 3 elements which I personally believe no story can do without is a character, setting, and obstacle. And if you do it in that order, you create the character, then do the setting, then do the obstacles, that kind of means that you are automatically building up everything around the client and their character. So you've met them, you know what their quote unquote presenting issues are. But if you start off with saying, rather than saying what game would you like to play and offering them D&D, The One Ring, Quest, Marvel, Besom, just say, well, what kind of game would you like to play? Do you want to play fantasy, superhero, sci-fi? And then once you've settled on that, you say, okay, well, let's create a character. And again, I created a character sheet which can be filled in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And you go through that, you create the character. And by the time you finish that, you've got an idea as to what the story is going to be, because if they've created, a swashbuckling swordsman, odds are they're going to want people to buckle swashes against and, stab and swing from chandeliers and all that. And so then you go and produce the setting, which will be conducive to that. And you'll get input from them saying, well, how about we put a castle over here with lots of chandeliers to swing from. And I need a pirate ship. And then once you've done that, that's when you can put in the obstacles that are both engaging. It's like there are pirates coming, get your sword, let's go. But also you can put things in the character's way which are going to challenge the client's less than helpful outlook. So for example, a very simple one that I do quite regularly is with people who come and are very anxious about making decisions. Just walk their character through a forest. There's a tree in front of you. Which way do you go, left or right? just no stakes whatsoever, but it's a small decision. And if you just keep repeating, that exercise or similarly created exercises for whichever issue you're tackling, the RPG becomes a place for practice.
Yeah.
And experiencing what it might like to be in a certain situation.
It definitely feels like, because we're in a world of safety tools and like exploring things, but as a result, I mean, I'm so grateful for those sort of things, because then it means we can explore topics and themes sensitively with everyone's consent at the table. And like, for example, I'm currently preparing for like a folk horror game. And in the book, the sort of setting is Solemn Vale. It's a cracking little system, all great, but it is incredibly dark. It really picks up on those 1970s, Wicker Man, all that sort of thing, can be very, very dark. And certainly in folklore horror, children come up a lot, hurt to children, sacrificing, all that sort of thing, self-harm, all sex. And it's one of those things where I don't think something that's, it's very interesting, and yeah, these are the stories we can tell. But some people are like, I don't want to tell those stories. And so being able to check in and be like, we can see what the issues are, or see what here are the things that are on the table. Are people happy for us to push that and see how far we can go? And then if it goes too far, we could be like, oh, pause, draw back, let's just experience that. And I think sometimes we limit ourselves just by saying like, I just want to play Dungeons & Dragons. It's not a political game, it's not this, it's not that. And you're like, but it could be. It's not a bad thing to have politics in our games, because then actually you can experience it in a safe way that doesn't necessarily hurt you in the real world, where politics is a thing, where war is a thing, and issues about gender and politics and people just being horrible to people, that is a thing. And if we can explore it in this safe environment, in the safety place, we can then be like, we can train ourselves to be like, if we can see what's happening here, we can see it in the real world, and maybe be able to make decisions about it in the real world and be able to stand up for ourselves.
And that is the key word, safety. Because obviously the whole point of coming to therapy is that you're exploring issues that have made you less than content in life, and they can be any number of things. But the reason you go to therapy rather than just talking to your next door neighbor is you're doing it in a safe environment, A, with a trained professional, but B, where nothing can come back to you. You can talk about how annoying your parents are and know that they're never going to find out about it.
Exactly.
And there's this concept in the therapeutic world called the therapeutic frame, which is all about the boundaries of the environment, confidentiality, all of the things that allow for that safety. But I also talk about the fictional frame, because creating this story, creating the RPG world, and putting your client via their character into that world, all of a sudden there's an even greater sense of safety. Because again, we're not talking about the client's problems, we're talking about the character's problems. And any bad things that are going to happen to the character. Any consequences to decisions, the client can go, yeah, it wasn't me, it was them. See, let them take it, let them deal with it. And yeah, safety is the key word for any therapeutic process. And that's what I love so much about using RPGs in the therapeutic process, because it just dials the safety up to 11.
It's made me think about something that comes across sometimes in my games when I do streaming and stuff. I obviously want to take care of the players, certainly if it's horror games, because obviously sometimes that's very close to the bone on certain things. And obviously, so you'll have your lines and veils, you have your safety tools and stuff. But then if we have, for example, in a game, such as I've run the Alien RPG.
Oh, it's a great game.
It's a fantastic game, but you're not meant to survive. You can be the very cool Marine, but these creatures, they are unrelenting. It's not only is it the creatures, you say, oh, Alien, you know what the big bad is? It's actually the big governments, it's the horrible space, it's all these things.
Corporations, it's everything, yeah.
It's everything, which is great, and I really enjoyed that. But then when we have a character death, It's so interesting because I guess, I don't know, from my perspective as a game mother for that, I'm very aware that, okay, be careful about describing too much gore. Be careful about certain things. But I've had players who are suddenly very attached to these pre-generated characters, so not even the custom characters, because the moment is where they were in the story. They were fixing the ship. They just got to get back to the airlock, and a creature appears, and the creature just rolled too high on the table, and it's an instant death. And that sudden moment, obviously, it shocks everyone. And, I call breaks and all that sort of thing. But it's got to that point now where, in a sense, for me, one thing I definitely try and do with a lot of my games is talk about that emotional bleed. So before you were saying like that idea of like, okay, you customize the character, so anything that happens to me, it happens to that character. It's you. So it's not you. But it's so interesting. I mean, I've experienced it myself with various games when, a character that was close to the character I was playing just died trying to save me, and we were playing online, and for various reasons we couldn't stay afterwards, and I was just sat here in this chair going, I don't know what to do. And I just felt that those emotions and stuff like that. And so it's so interesting how something that we've made up that's in our heads, the theatre of the mind, and something happens, you make that decision. There's a worksheet that I've used, which is just like, it's a LARPing worksheet where you decompress and try and separate out from the characters. Like, what did you do well in the session? What didn't you do? Why are you feeling these feelings and putting them out? Because I hadn't even considered role-playing games, even though they are very personal. You make your decisions that you could still think about, and what happened in the game could so it's almost like the opposite way from what we're talking about. I just wanted to know if you had any thoughts on like that emotional bleed that we do have in role-playing games.
That's the cool thing, and that's why it works as therapy, because the actions that the character is taking, so like talking, for example, or like standing up to a bully or whatever, it's not going to come back on the client because it's the character doing it. But the emotions that we're discussing are real. So one question I frequently ask is, okay, so how does the character feel about this particular situation? Okay, how do you feel about this particular situation?
Put them out, yeah.
And then kind of the follow-on from those, how would you feel if you were in the character's situation? Therapy, as I'm sure you will be aware, is all about emotional work, and the characters, because there is research that shows that we develop relationships and emotions with fictional characters in much the same way as we develop them with real people. And so when we talk about characters, it's like we're talking about real people, real experiences. And that bleed of emotions from the game into the client is kind of the point. That's where the therapy happens. So for example, the young man in question realizes, I don't need to be worried about talking because the character wasn't worried about talking. And if you're up fighting against a dragon, okay, you're not going to necessarily appreciate the nuances of the situation, because between you and me, I don't know many people who have actually fought dragons.
Me neither.
But the emotion of being in a dangerous environment with this big, scary individual towering down on you, we know what those emotions are like. We've all had experience of bullying in some form or other, even if it was just some muppet on the tube mouthing off at you. And as a professional, the therapist's job is to grab hold of those emotions and dangle them in front of the client and say, you see, we've been doing the work all along.
It's inside you all along, essentially.
Oh, you didn't just say that.
I did.
Oh, sorry. Well, it's been nice knowing you. Good.
I was going to ask, again, feel free to say you don't know anything about it. In terms of genres, like you said, what kind of game do you want to play there? From what your experience, do people mostly go towards high fantasy? Because it feels like obviously D&D is the moment right now. Or do you find there's a much more wider range of like genres, like, I want to do action hero, or I want to do horror or sci-fi, if you see what I mean?
I mean, boring answer to that, I'm afraid. It's all down to the client. I think there is a tendency towards fantasy simply because I'm a fantasy author.
That is fair.
but also there is something very otherworldly about fantasy, so that makes it even further removed. So again, you can liken tackling a dragon to tackling a bully, whereas if in a sci-fi environment, yes, you can have an alien instead of a dragon, and there's obviously there's still a difference, but the Star Trek alien still looks very similar to a human. And I mean, I've played so many different types of scenarios. I mean, I had one client, finished with him, I think not that long ago actually, who were just doing something set in the Vietnam War, just because he was doing that at school and thought, yeah, that's gonna be cool to do that. I went through a phase where all of my clients wanted to play firebenders. And then the Avatar Legends came out, and never once since has anybody played Firebender.
That's such a shame. It's a very cool system. My partner's really into Avatar and Korra and all that sort of thing. So my plan is to learn it and run through it at some point, though, because it is definitely like one of the media touchstones recently. And then it comes out and then nobody wants to play. Like, come on, guys.
yeah, 100%. And yeah, there are some great. You can't go into space without having your own spaceship and things like that. Right. So I think, yes, in answer to your question, it does lean towards fantasy, but not necessarily as much as the RPG industry leans towards fantasy.
That's fair. No, that's just very interesting because, I guess because it feels like the last 10 years there's been this huge resurgence, and as we were saying before, it's like RPG equals D&D. That seems to be the general mainstream stuff. So that's why I was just like, I would assume that, but you're right, it obviously comes down to the individual person. My other question, because obviously you've running games one-on-one, and I feel like obviously that's in the context of your work, but it's interesting because when we've run games, usually it's for a group of people, but then so and so can't make it, or this person can't make it, and so when it diminishes down to less people, is the likelihood is for people just to be like, oh, let's not have the session, or let's not do it. And I wondered, like, from your point of view, again, I appreciate it's part of your work, so you'll already have that confidence of talking to someone one-on-one about these things. But like running a game for one person, like how is that as an experience for you? Like, are you more aware of certain elements? Obviously you've got your own system, I know, but like, do you take some elements completely out and you're like, actually, again, depending on the client, but do you know what I mean? Because I feel like running the game for one person, a lot of the time, obviously they're making a lot of decisions, I guess. And if they're not necessarily making that decision for whatever reason, I guess, how do you compensate for that? Like, is there any thoughts on that per se?
Well, that was oddly enough the other big factor in why most excellent RPGs don't necessarily work in a therapeutic setting. So there's that complexity. It's like, oh god, you're going to ask your clients to read all this? No, thanks. But also the vast majority of them are designed specifically for group play. So you need a balanced party to get through the dungeon. The bard isn't going to last all that long by himself. The alien RPG, you need your crew. And so, doing one-to-one play. Again, there are some games out there, and more are coming all the time for solo game, which I think is excellent. I'm a huge fan of Colossal. If you've
such a good game. Yeah, the expansion and stuff, and that's such a cool setting. We'll hang on. Let's do this tangent right now, because that idea that you are smaller people in the Roomlands, this huge big place. You look up, you see the beams of the roof, etc., and you're surrounded by these rook type characters, which are unknown what they are, and the art is beautiful. And everything about it is just really, the setting is just really fucking cool. And I'm 100% behind it, and it's a UK publisher.
And Nick Angel is a lovely bloke as well. I'm on his Patreon. My name's actually in the back of Kia Diner because I'm one of his patrons, and it's just like, oh yeah. And he's going to have another book coming out eventually because he just keeps pushing out content for this stuff, and it's just incredible. But so I actually recommend that as a self-care exercise, because the other thing that people come to therapy for is because they just haven't got a clue how to enjoy their time. They've got every minute of every day needs to be productive. And okay, great. So you're working all day. What do you do for fun? I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. So it's like, okay, colossal.
Yeah.
So I'm currently playing a character who's essentially a Power Ranger.
Oh, very cool.
Rooks keep coming into the city and have to be, it's just, haven't quite got to a Rook Zord yet, but it's going to happen.
It's one of those games, again, that don't need much for the solo players. It's just card-based and this idea of journaling as your character and stuff. But the art is cool, and it's just so simple, the prompts and stuff. It's such a simple mechanic, but it's a cool idea. That's the thing for me with all these actual plays and stuff. As the rules, I will make, if the concept interests me to the point where I'm like, I'm buying it. It doesn't really matter too much. I'd say, she says, touch wood, about how complex the mechanics are. If I find it interesting, I've got to that position now where I'm just going to bloody run it. I don't care. And that's the thing with Colossal, because it's just so straightforward. Like I gave it to my flatmates who was going through a bit of a time. I was just like, just spend an hour doing that. And she did. And I only did it once, but she was like, this was really good. And I was like, I know.
Because, side note, RPGs are therapeutic, regardless of whether or not they're in therapy. You and I both know, we go and play a game, we come away feeling better. We've had a good time with our friends, usually doing cool stuff, and there's always been at least one moment, oh god, that was amazing.
That was amazing. That was a clutch play, and I can't believe you said that to so and so.
Yeah, exactly. So the therapeutic value is just there. And so, as I say, Colossal is one of those games where I just frequently say, right, because you're a creative person, just give this a try. It won't require too much time. You can pick it up and put it down whenever you want. Nobody else in the world has to see it, but it will just get your imagination working, and it will give you something to hold on to.
And there's no end. You can keep going.
Just
it's like tick, tick, tick for you.
Yeah. It's But no, on the one-to-one play, not really. Is the answer to your question? Is it that different? Simply because by the time you've gone through that story trinity, you've created everything around the character. Because of that, everything is automatically balanced towards the session. So if you're a D&D party going through a dungeon, again, the bard isn't going to get very far by themselves, so they need to have a tank and somebody who's better at healing than a bard, and for example. Whereas if you've created this setting specifically for the character to exist in, and these obstacles specifically for the character, and thus by extension the client to overcome, then everything is it relies on the interaction between you and the client and the game. And then it just becomes it's a decision-making process. And that's where the therapy comes in, because we're looking at, well, why did you make those decisions? What was going on for you whilst you made those decisions? I produce a monthly-ish newsletter, and if you subscribe to it, you get a free adventure pack to run with clients, and which includes a pamphlet-sized adventure specifically designed to be run in the space of a single session. And that is just a case of somebody gets shot with a poisoned arrow, you need to go and find the antidote. And the number of different ways that can be achieved, as we all know, that some of the coolest moments in an RPG is when the players just do something that you were completely not expecting. But yes, so I've had clients chase after the guy with the poisoned weapon to get the antidote. I've had clients go through forest to collect ingredients to make their own antidote. I've had clients travel to the nearest town to buy one. It's less you're just one person now, so you need to be strong enough to overcome the dungeon by yourself, and more, this is the situation, and you need to get to the other side of the situation. Off you go. And when you get to the other side, and in between, you go, okay, well, what's going on for you right now? How are you feeling? Are you a bit worried, are you? Okay, well, yeah, what are you worried about? Okay, yeah, so you're worried that the poisoned man is not feeling very well. Yeah, well, is that a reasonable thing to feel? Yeah, I'd be worried as well. And the great thing about the RPGs in therapy is the therapy is never far away.
It feels like you can easily slip in and out of it. It's just literally a stop in the conversation, similar to how I'd be like, is everyone having a good time? Or do we need to go for a bio break? It just feels that sort of naturalistic thing, which you lead, obviously, as the GM. That's it's nice that so that you're not constantly sort of put on the spot per se. You just, it's that sort of like just general sort of conversational, which I assume that's all that's what therapy is. I know, but it's quite nice to have that, so that like you're not having that pressure to constantly make decisions like as you and I having to answer things. It's just just a nice way just to talk about it through this other medium, which I really, really love.
If you have fun with it, the client will have fun with it. And nobody can take therapy too seriously when you're talking like a goblin, And, if you use big, effusive language and expansive hand gestures, it's just like, you're in this giant, you're in a big room. You're in a big room. It goes right up to the sky. You can see things flying across. If you ham it up to the nth degree, they will too.
Yeah, they'll feel safe that they can do that with you. Yeah.
And then when they think of something cool, they'll feel able to put it in. The traditional impression of RPGs is the GM runs it, the players play it. I mean, that's not 100% correct anyway, but even less so here. It's much more a dialogue than interrupted monologue, if that makes sense. And because it's very small scale, because it's following the client's decisions and their character's actions, there's much less chance of railroading, because you don't have time to go on a world-saving quest. You might have time to go down the road for a cup of tea, for example.
Well, thank you. We've come to sort of the end of the hour. Just to chat. No, don't be sorry. That's the one thing I don't want you to be.
I cannot believe that's that time gone. Jeez.
Yeah, well, because again, it's just nice to be able to talk about these things, because it's lots of stuff that I was saying to you before we recorded. Like the stuff that I want to know more about as someone who is an educator in these things. That these are things I've experienced, and like I said about the emotional bleed and talking to people about this, and I've experienced myself. So it's just interesting to hear it from like where can we put this, and how can we not necessarily codify it, that's not what I mean, but just use it in things. Because it sounds like, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of the people who do this with you, they haven't experienced role-playing games before, and that whole thing we talked about people looking in going, oh, role-playing games, and actually just to be like, here are benefits to this, and it is working, and we need more, whether it's funding for this sort of thing, maybe we need more of that highlighted, just to get into the zeitgeist. Because a lot of the times when we have the arts and humanities, they kind of get put, there's nothing concrete about it. They don't give us results. And I'm like, the results here are benefits for our mental health, which is so important when we're in this sort of climate right now. Those are my thoughts, but thank you so much. I guess, Daniel, my final question is there anything you'd like to add that we've not covered? Anything like a takeaway message, or even just like final thoughts, I guess, from this conversation we've had?
Please, if you're listening, go out and proselytize. Go out and say to your therapist, oh, have you heard of this? If you have a friend who's a therapist, say, oh, you should give this a try. The satanic panic has a lot to answer for. This is a thing that would have happened 20 years ago if it hadn't been all pushed underground. And because of that, we really need to make up for lost time. There is a select group of therapists out there who are verifiable geeks as well, and they don't need to be convinced on the efficacy of RPGs. The problem is the vast majority of therapists aren't certified geeks, and if there's any way we can just get this out there more, please do go out, spread the word. Buy the book. Don't buy the book, just leave a review on Amazon. Even if it's a 1-star review, don't leave 1-star reviews.
Without it, but you need to leave it with a comment. That's the thing. Don't leave it as a 1, because that's just being a bit of an arse, I find.
But that's the other thing I say is, if you've read the book and you think, oh, it's not great, go out and write your own. Seriously. I am not precious. You can tell me what I've done wrong, I'm fine. But we need more books on the topic out there. This needs to become a thing. You know that, I know that, all of your listeners know that. That's why they're here. Push it out onto the rest of the world. So please go and do that if you can.
No, thank you so much. And I agree. I've been looking at some solo RPG games and how we can turn it into immersive theatre stuff, and how do we get people creating new improv formats, because that's where my background is improvisation, which obviously goes hand in hand with role-playing games. And so, like, how do we take and make it into a show where people don't go, well, that's a role-playing game. There's no dice or anything like that. It's music, and it's it's called Void 1680 AM, and it's just all it is. It's just a solo game where you make your own playlists, but in the guise of a radio host talking out into the night, and then you have things called callers that call you in and you talk to them. I'm like, well, that makes an instance of, I mean, there's so many podcasts that are like late night radio shows and stuff like that. It's like, well, how can we put these elements together? There's a unique experience that you go and you listen to possibly a very grounded story about late night talk shows, and about people talking who rings into talk shows is people who have an opinion, and then the person on the other end is someone that listens and debates that opinion and stuff. So that's where I'm coming from for this. I want to make role-playing games into sort of more of a performance piece, but then it's not like, so it is that Dungeons and Dragons show, and you're like, kind of, but it just gives us new ways to be creative. So yeah, I think we're both in agreement that role-playing games, they're like, we need to put them out there for everyone, because they do. I really, when you said that about like you feel good after doing a role-playing game, I remember like during the pandemic, we had our 5-year weekly D&D game. We did it, and I would look forward to it. That was the thing that made me think about like, okay, beginning of the week, got my D&D game, that's fine. And when it got cancelled, because it does get cancelled, I'd be like, can we play something else? I'll run something. Because just that fact that we're meeting together means that I know that this is the start of the week, and we can go from, and that to me is more important, that we meet and play something, not necessarily the same game, just so that we have that connection. And that was so important during the pandemic, and it's something that we've continued doing through now. So,
and that's why I mentioned it takes away some of the fear of therapy. It gives you something to hold on to through the difficult times. Yeah, I'm feeling really rubbish now, but I've got the RPG later. I can go and kill the dragon.
Yeah, we can sort this out with, we can go fight with our words and this, that, and the other. And yeah, absolutely.
And just develop crippling dice addiction.
That's we don't really talk about that too much. It's fine. I'm not concerned with it. I guess before we compare dice collections, Daniel, where can we find your work? Where can we watch your content on RPG Therapy? And where can we get your book?
So the book itself is Role-Playing Games in Psychotherapy, a Practitioner's Guide. It sounds very official and professional and practical and all that. Actually, it is basically just an academically published GM's guide. And more to the point, a very simple GM's guide. So it actually, even if you're not a therapist, if you've got a group of young players, for example, or people who just want a quick and easy game to play, I would say pick it up. The core mechanic is you roll a die, or whatever die you happen to have to hand. So you can roll your single D20 and compare that to the results table, or you can roll the D6, or you can roll 2D6, or you can it's just you roll a die and whatever it says happens. Simple. And the character creation process is all about relationships. There isn't a set spell list, for example. You just say, okay, what spell would you like your character to be able to cast? So you don't have to spend 2 hours searching through the player's handbook going, oh yeah, I need to cast this spell and I need to expend a spell slot. It's just, okay, no, my favorite ever spell that a client's come up with was a spell that instantly made the target say a random swear word.
Incredible.
That was it. And it was hilarious. And it was a young client, so they were just testing, can I get away with swearing in front of this guy? Yes, you can. But also, the number of times he used it to get away. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm just good. So those two are talking. I was like, I'm just going to get him to swear. And then obviously, the person he's talking to punches him. And like, okay, yeah, distraction sorted. Beautiful. I'm getting out now. So
that's so cool. I love that. That's so creative.
Of course, and there was another one just below that was the one that made people fart, which was
there's always a farting spell somewhere. You're like, it has to be one somewhere.
If there isn't, you're not doing it right. So yes, even if you're not a professional therapist, as long as you promise not to therapize your players, I'm not just saying it. I do genuinely believe. And the book could help you in your game. So Role-Playing Games and Psychotherapy, a Practitioner's Guide. My professional website is monomythcounselling.co.uk. You can contact me there for A, therapy, or B, RPG therapist training. You can also sign up there for my monthly newsletter, Handwriting. Did you see what I did there?
That's it. Very good.
And if you sign up for that, you'll get a free adventure pack which is fully compatible with the book.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I'm also on Facebook, Daniel Hand, and YouTube at RPG Therapist, where I talk about how to use the story trinity, why therapists find RPGs so difficult to use, etc. And occasionally have people on. We geek out over things. And yeah, so please do come and join the conversation. Would be my invitation to you.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. It's been a wonderful hour and a little bit just chatting to you about this stuff. And yeah, I feel like I'm gonna see you a payday or see if that book appears in my Amazon thing. But thank you so much. It's been really, honestly, been an absolute pleasure to have you there.
Oh, thank you. I've been really looking forward to this. It's been really nice. Thank you.
I'm hoping to do more of these special Q&A bonus episodes in future, including Q&As on the one-shots we've run here at What Am I Rolling? If you have a question or think of an RPG designer who you'd like to see interviewed on this podcast, let us know. Our email address is whatamirollingpodcast@gmail.com. And that's it. Great. See you next time.